Chapter 5. I left the old train station with the silver key in my pocket. My steps were slow. My mind was full of questions. I looked at the old letter once again. Then I looked at the key. They were both small things, but together they carried many years of history. The old library on Maple Street was not far away. I decided to go there immediately. The morning was quiet. The sun shone through the trees. Birds sang from the branches. People walked past me without knowing where I was going. To them, it was an ordinary day. To me, it felt like the beginning of a new chapter. After a short walk, I reached the library. The building looked old but beautiful. Large stone walls stood proudly. Tall windows were covered with dust. A faded sign still hung above the entrance. I gently pushed the wooden door. It opened with a soft sound. Inside, everything was silent. Rows of old books filled the shelves. Some books were covered with dust. Others looked as if they had not been touched for many years. The air smelled of paper and wood. Sunlight entered through the windows and filled the room with a warm light. I walked slowly between the shelves. At the back of the library, I noticed a small wooden desk. On top of it rested an old wooden box. It was not large, it was dark brown. A small lock was fixed to the front. My heart beat faster. I took the silver key from my pocket. For a moment, I simply looked at the box. I remembered the old woman's words. The dream will begin again. I placed the key into the lock. It turned easily. I lifted the lid very slowly. Inside, I did not find money. I did not find jewels. Instead, I found several handwritten notebooks. There were also many old letters tied together with a blue ribbon. Under them rested a small cloth bag. I opened the bag carefully. Inside were a few old coins and a tiny wooden bookmark. The bookmark had simple words carved into it. Knowledge is the greatest gift. I smiled as I read those words. Then I opened the first notebook. On the first page, I saw a name, Michael Carter. Below the name, another sentence was written in careful handwriting. If someone is reading these pages, my dream is still alive. I continued reading. Michael wrote about his childhood. He wrote about meeting my father at school. He described how they spent long afternoons reading books together. They believed that stories could change people. They believed that learning gave hope. They wanted every child to have the chance to read, even if the child's family had very little money. Page after page, I learned more about their dream. They wanted to collect books from people across the town. They wanted volunteers to teach children every weekend. They wanted the library to become a place where everyone felt welcome. Then I reached the final pages. Michael's handwriting became weaker. He wrote about his illness. He wrote about the days when he became too weak to continue. But one thing never changed. His hope remained strong. The last lines touched my heart deeply. Dreams do not belong to one person. They belong to everyone who believes in them. If I cannot finish this journey, I hope someone else will continue it with kindness and courage. I closed the notebook slowly. For a long moment, I sat in silence. I finally understood why my father had protected the letter. I finally understood why the old man had searched for me. This story was never about a secret. It was about a promise. It was about keeping hope alive. As I looked around the quiet library, I imagined children reading books, laughing together, and discovering new ideas. The empty building no longer looked forgotten. Instead, it looked full of possibility. I stood up and held the notebook close to my heart. At that moment, I made a quiet promise to myself. I would not let Michael's dream end inside an old wooden box. I would do everything I could to bring life back to this silent library. I did not know how difficult the journey would be, but I knew one thing with complete certainty. The final letter had not been asking me to remember the past. It had been inviting me to build the future. Chapter 6. The next morning, I returned to the old library. This time, I did not come only to read. I came to work. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. Dust covered the tables. Old books rested on the shelves. The room was quiet. It felt as if the building had been waiting for someone to return. I looked around and smiled. This place will live again, I said softly. I started with small tasks. I opened the windows. Fresh air filled the room. I cleaned one table, then I cleaned another. I carried old boxes to one side. I arranged the books carefully. It was slow work, but I enjoyed every moment. After a few hours, someone knocked on the door. It was my friend Ethan. He looked around the library with surprise. "What are you doing here?" he asked. I smiled. "I am trying to bring this place back to life." He laughed gently. "That is a very big job." "I know," I replied, "but every big job begins with one small step." I told him the whole story. I told him about the old man. I told him about the letter. I showed him Michael's notebook. I explained the dream of the free library. Ethan listened without speaking. When I finished, he looked around the room once more. Then he smiled. "You will not do this alone," he said. He picked up a broom and started cleaning. His simple action filled my heart with hope. The next day, Ethan brought two more friends. They cleaned the shelves, they repaired broken chairs, they carried heavy boxes outside. Everyone worked with energy. Nobody asked for money. They only wanted to help. A few neighbors became curious. They stopped by to see what was happening. One elderly woman brought a box of children's books. She smiled and said, "These belong to my grandson. He has finished reading them. Maybe another child will enjoy them." The next day, a teacher visited the library. He donated several dictionaries and storybooks. A local carpenter repaired the broken door without asking for payment. Another person painted the old walls. Little by little, the building began to change. The rooms became brighter. The shelves became full again. The library slowly came back to life. One evening, I stood near the entrance and looked around. The same silent building now felt warm and welcoming. I remembered Michael's final words. Dreams do not belong to one person. Now I understood them completely. A dream becomes stronger when many people believe in it. One person starts the journey, then another person joins. Soon, many hearts are working together. A few days later, I received a phone call from my father. He had heard about the library from an old friend. His voice became quiet. "I think it is time for us to talk," he said. The next afternoon, he arrived at the library. He walked slowly through the front door. His eyes moved across the shelves. He touched one of the old tables. Then he smiled. "It looks just as Michael imagined," he whispered. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. Then my father looked at me. "I wanted to tell you this story many years ago," he said, "but I promised Michael that I would wait until you were ready. I wanted you to discover the dream on your own. I wanted the decision to come from your heart, not from my words." I nodded quietly. "I understand now," I replied. He placed his hand on my shoulder. "I am proud of you," he said. "You did not continue this dream because someone forced you. You continued it because you believed in it." Those words meant more to me than anything else. At that moment, I realized that the last letter had done something much greater than reveal a family secret. It had connected the past with the present. It had turned an old promise into a new beginning. And together, we were writing the next chapter of a story that would continue for many years to come. Chapter 7. The weeks passed quickly. Every day, something new happened at the library. More people came to help. Some cleaned the shelves, some repaired old tables, others carried books from their homes. The empty rooms slowly became full of life. Every small effort made a big difference. One morning, I stood outside the building and looked at the new sign above the door. It was simple. It read, Community Library. I smiled. The building no longer looked forgotten. It looked warm and welcoming. It looked ready for a new beginning. The opening day finally arrived. The sun was shining brightly. The sky was blue. Flowers stood near the entrance. Colorful balloons moved gently in the wind. Children laughed as they waited outside with their parents. Teachers, neighbors, and old friends gathered together. The library had become a place of hope. I looked around and saw my father standing near the front door. He was smiling. Beside him stood the old woman from the train station. She looked proud. Then I noticed the old man who had brought me the letter. He quietly waved at me from the back of the crowd. I walked over to him. I have been looking for you, I said. He smiled gently. I know, he replied. I still do not know your name. He laughed softly. My name is Thomas, he said. I was Michael's closest friend after your father. When Michael became sick, he trusted me with the last letter. I promised that I would protect it until the right day. I shook his hand warmly. Thank you for keeping your promise. He looked toward the library. No, he answered. Thank you for completing it. His words filled my heart with gratitude. Soon, everyone gathered near the entrance. My father gave a short speech. He spoke about friendship. He spoke about kindness. He spoke about dreams that continue from one generation to another. Then he invited me to say a few words. I felt nervous. I looked at the smiling faces in front of me. Then I began. When I received one old letter, I thought it was only about my family, I said. Now I understand that it belongs to all of us. One person had a dream. Another person protected that dream. Many people helped bring it back to life. This library is not the work of one person. It is the work of a whole community. Everyone smiled. Some people quietly clapped. Then the children rushed inside the library. They walked from shelf to shelf with excited faces. Some picked up adventure stories. Some chose books about animals. Others sat together and started reading immediately. The room became full of laughter and happy voices. It was exactly as Michael had imagined many years ago. Later that afternoon, after everyone had gone home, I sat alone at the old wooden desk. I opened Michael's notebook one more time. As I turned the final page, I noticed something I had never seen before. A small folded piece of paper was hidden inside the back cover. I carefully opened it. It contained only a few lines. If this library is full of children, my dream has already come true. Do not remember me with sadness. Remember me every time someone opens a book, learns a new idea, or believes in a better future. That will be my greatest reward. I read those words slowly, then I closed my eyes for a moment. The room around me was peaceful. The shelves were full. The chairs were occupied. Children were smiling. The dream was no longer only a dream. It had become real. At that moment, I understood that the greatest gift in life is not something we keep for ourselves. The greatest gift is something we share with others. And because one letter was protected with love, an entire town now had a place where hope, learning, and kindness would continue to grow every single day. Chapter 8. 1 year passed after the library opened. Life changed in many beautiful ways. Every morning, children walked through the front door with happy faces. Some came before school. Some came after school. They borrowed books. They asked questions. They discovered new ideas. The library was no longer an old building. It had become a place full of life. I still worked at the bookshop, but I spent every free evening at the library. I helped children choose books. I read stories to young readers every Saturday. Volunteers also came every week. Teachers offered free lessons. College students helped with homework. Parents sat with their children and read together. Every person gave something valuable. Some gave time, some gave knowledge, some gave books. Every gift mattered. My father visited often. Each time he entered the library, I saw happiness in his eyes. He walked slowly between the shelves. Sometimes he picked up an old book and smiled quietly. I knew he was remembering his friend Michael. He once said to me, "A true friend never disappears. A true friend lives inside the good work that continues after them." Those words stayed in my heart. One afternoon, the old man named Thomas came to see me. He looked healthier than before. He carried a small wooden frame in his hands. "I have something for the library," he said. He placed the frame on the desk. Inside it was an old photograph. It showed three young men standing beside the old train station. One was my father, one was Michael. The third was Thomas. All three were smiling. Below the photograph were a few simple words. "A dream grows when good people protect it together." We hung the photograph on the library wall. Many visitors stopped to look at it. Some asked about the story. I told them about friendship. I told them about promises. I told them about one letter that had waited many years to reach the right hands. Every time I shared the story, I remembered how confused I had felt on that rainy afternoon. At that time, I believed the letter would answer one question. Instead, it gave my life a new purpose. One evening, I stayed alone in the library after everyone had gone home. The sun was setting outside. Golden light filled the room. The shelves were full of books. Small chairs stood neatly around the reading tables. Everything was peaceful. I opened the brown envelope one last time. I read the first sentence again. "Dear Daniel, if you are reading this letter, it means the right day has finally come." This time, those words felt different. The right day had not been the day I opened the letter. The right day was the day I understood its meaning. The letter had never been about finding a secret. It had been about discovering responsibility. It had been about carrying hope from one generation to the next. I carefully folded the letter. Then I placed it inside a glass display case near the entrance of the library. Beside it, I added a small note. One letter, one promise, one dream. Many lives changed. People often stopped to read those words. Many smiled. Some became thoughtful. A few even decided to donate books after reading the story. The letter continued to inspire people just as Michael had hoped. Before leaving the library that evening, I looked around one final time. Children's drawings covered one wall. Shelves were filled with stories from many countries. Soft laughter still echoed in my memory. The building no longer felt old. It felt alive. As I locked the front door, I looked up at the evening sky. I smiled quietly. Sometimes people believe that the greatest gifts are money, success, or fame. But life teaches a different lesson. A kind word can change a heart. A promise can survive many years. A simple letter can guide a person toward a better future. And one honest decision can inspire hundreds of others. So, as this story comes to an end, remember one simple message. Never ignore the small moments in life. Never forget the promises you make. Never stop helping others. You may never know how far one act of kindness will travel. A letter is only paper. Words are only ink. But when they are filled with love, truth, and hope, they can change a life forever. And sometimes they can change the future of an entire community.